Well, hello everyone. Thanks for joining this live stream on homeschooling. My name is Dr. Fred Ray Lybrand. We homeschool 5 kids from birth to college, and we're not ashamed of any of them. So let's see if we can't throw you a few ideas that'd be helpful. I want to talk today about teaching too much. I want to do that by really walking through an article that someone sent me that I like. There's some weaknesses with it, so I kind of want to show you how to read discerningly too. Though I really like this man's conclusions. So if I can pull this off, I'm going to show my screen and then walk through this article. So this article by John Roseman, Living with Children, Homeschooling, Living with Children, Homeschooling, Relax about the involvement thing. So he says involvement, and I would call it really something more like teaching. You know, how involved are you is right. How much time do you spend teaching? How much time do you spend preparing? And what John Roseman, who I don't know, does wonderfully is he comes to a great conclusion, and he walks you through a little bit of how he gets there. So he's kind of laying out an argument, and I want to just show you this argument, the conclusion, try to help you think maybe a little bit about backing off, because frankly you can just simply teach too much and it'll wear you out. It's something we've talked about a lot. He says in here he doesn't know about any articles, so I can tell you our How to Homeschool in 30 Minutes a Day course at independenthomeschool.com really shows you how to do this, because that's what we did. So let me show you. He says, I'm a rational person, okay? So his conclusion is going to be great. I just want you to see this. I think I'm rational, and I can offer proof that smaller class size propaganda is nothing but propaganda. Small classes are overrated. Individual attention is overrated. It quickly reaches the point of diminishing returns. So that's his premise. If he'd used the word evidence, I can offer evidence. That'd be great. Proof is a higher standard if you study it. We use this kind of in our culture all the time. So we mean evidence, but does it prove it? No. And I'm going to tell you up front, what you want to do is prove it to yourself, so to speak. But follow John's thoughts. Here's his proof. He says, or his evidence. He says, history, personal, otherwise. He went to school in 1952, first grade. I'm about 6 years behind him. So we probably experienced somewhat similar things. Kindergarten was not universal in South Carolina. I was in Alabama. We probably did experience similar things. And we had large classrooms, and I remember that too, especially after integration happened. The schools, the way the game worked, they just bombarded the schools. And I don't know if they planned for the baby boom following World War II that well either. So we were packed. He says 50 in a class. I remember, he said there were 95 first graders. We didn't have that many, certainly in first grade, but we had 20 or 30, something that ranged. I remember in high school or junior high, there might be 30 to 40 kids in a class, which was challenging. Of course, I went to University of Alabama, and we would have lectures that would have, a couple hundred people in a class. So it's not like you can't learn. But think about this. So he says it's a large classroom for sure. Spoken to women who taught as many as 95 first graders, rather, in the early to mid-1950s, first wave of boomers, right? So he talked about how orderly the teaching environments were, and I think that's true. I think that's a big point. Today, third world, he says, areas, classroom size is huge by our standards. That's true, too. I've been to Uganda. I've spoken in many schools for high school and really younger. I've spoken to lots of them. And those classes are kind of big because it's an efficiency thing. Having a teacher try to teach one person at a time is largely impossible. So He walks us through this, and he's asking the question, how much individual attention do you think any child received in first grade class? And his point is, you're right, very little, occasional. We had to pay attention, get it? So I think that's fair. I'm not sure that the key is to paying attention. I'll walk through that. But he offers this little model here, which is pretty good. Typically in the 1950s, elementary teacher taught for 15 minutes or so, gave a timed assignment, worked at her desk while her students worked at theirs, you see. When time was up, students exchanged, graded one another's papers. We do this in corporate coaching as well. We'll have not an overwhelming class, maybe 20 or so, maybe more, but we'll get them, and I've been in training like this, it might be 100 or two, and we'll work in smaller groups on something and come back. It's just a technique. Then to another subject area, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 5 minutes, put away one workbook, take out another. So it's this constant involvement of teaching for 15 minutes, giving a timed assignment, then having everyone grade it. And what I would argue there, it wasn't as much paying attention, because you could not pay attention, but the other students or the other context would help you get it. You do need to pay attention. But the trick was that the student was doing the work. And that's what I think is the issue here. We want your student to become his or her own teacher. You're the chief learning officer. So as he goes through this, the internet's full of advice for these new homeschoolers, many of whom are complaining of exhaustion, to relax about the involvement thing. Look, it is exhausting. And if you think you have to learn every subject, do every subject, teach every subject, you're going to wear out because you don't have the resources. So he's dead on there. He says homeschooling does not require a high level of parental involvement. I completely agree. That's exactly right. That, he says, is a myth. Well, the idea of a teacher needing to be involved, or that children must be taught, is a bit of a myth. Children are to be taught, encouraged to learn. He says across the demographic spectrum, student achievement in the 50s, when children were largely deprived of one-on-one attention, was significantly higher than it is today. The key to success, and I'll quit reading this, the key to success, full homeschooling, is not lots of involvement, right? It's organization. So, this statement is brilliant. It is organization. It's about systems and structures. When I'm given advice to a parent who wants to homeschool, I recommend the 15-35 routine. It worked with 50 or more kids. It'll surely work, and does, in fact, with less than a handful. So the pattern in his 15-35 routine, right, is the 15 of teaching and then 35 minutes of self-study and grading papers, whatever. I wouldn't recommend that in a homeschool. I might recommend it in a mass education context, because if you follow the principle, I don't even think you have to do 5 minutes of teaching. Don't the books teach them? I mean, you might need to teach your child to read. You might need to create some accountability to go through a phonics program. But honestly, the math book, isn't the instruction in the beginning? What's the magic of you telling them how long division works, or something that algebra works, and you explain it to them better than the book? Really? What's the magic of you being there, or them learning from someone else who's a teacher? The written word's just another teacher. So the books themselves, and I've found that, I just get the kids to go back and read the explanation a time or two. Usually doesn't take much more. And they go, oh, I get it. Because maybe back to his point, paying attention, really reading comprehension, that's where the teaching goes. But the learning happens when they are involved. So his summary statement, really statements, is the more individual attention children receive in a classroom setting, the more they expect it. Got it? So what gets rewarded gets done, and the more they become dependent on it. The attention overdose child is likely to not pay close attention to what his teacher is saying unless she's standing over him. Now, That's fair, but again, that's not the key. The key is not paying attention. The key is doing the work, being engaged in the activity. The involvement needs to be your sweet little baby. So talking directly to him in a homeschool situation, he goes on to say codependency is an ever-looming possibility. So codependency is exhausting. Homeschooling per se is not. Now, he is a psychologist, so good job. And I think what he hit the nail with his head. So you get this codependent relationship where the child can't learn without you. That is clearly not what you want. So what you really are wanting is, I hope I'm back live. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. What you're wanting is to cause your child to learn. And what this article is hitting on is pretty good, but you don't really need, the proof would be fine, but what I'm challenging you to do is to go try it yourself. Prove it to yourself. You don't need more studies. You don't need more thoughts out there. Your homeschool is an experimental construct anyway, and it just truly, truly is. So if it's experimental, you can do it based on principles of what we've learned in education over the years. But bottom line, your child you want to develop a skill in your child, and it's the ability to endure the two things that go with all learning. One, you want them to grow in their curiosity. How does this work? What's this talking about? How does this happen? So curiosity drives us to learn. The other thing that goes with getting educated is frustration. So frustration, where we don't understand it, it's always bothersome, don't you think? All you need is a new TV and a remote that doesn't work, or learning some computer program and the instructions aren't that good because some programmer wrote it for other programmers. And you sit there and frustrate it until you wrestle with it and get it straight. And when you get it straight, you have that, I've learned it. Well, your child is in a similar spot. You want to develop the skill so that that child can learn to teach him or herself. And you do that by creating an environment, an organization, a system that invites and requires them at the level they can handle to learn a little more and to learn a little more. As it were, they're figuring it out. And as one pop book now says it, everything is figure-outable, right? So figure-outable. You want them to figure it out. This would be similar to, what if you stood up in a class or in your homeschool and you taught vocabulary words to all the kids, right? So you are trying to teach them different words, like maelstrom, and use, so whirlwind, essentially, a little storm, a windy storm. It could be in a water too. So maelstrom, spell this, it means that. Really? That child can't read something and learn it? That child can't look up a word they don't know how to spell? See, this is what he's addressing. There's a codependent thing where they've got to learn because you've got to teach them, which means you've got to teach them first. You've got to study it yourself first. So you always have to be ahead of your student. That's not only exhausting, it's just a little bit crazy. You can't compete with the school system. They've hired all these experts to go in and teach this. Not that they're necessarily spending that much time teaching it, but what you can do is create an environment for learning. And so the more you direct them in the process of figuring out for themselves, when they figure out, they get it. If they're having a really hard time, you can help them, but I'd like to suggest you go back and look at something else. And that is, you may be overstretching them. Maybe they need a more intermediate step. Maybe instead of 30 math problems, you drop back to 15. If they mastered 15 problems a day, way better than semi-understanding 30 problems a day because of the building progressive nature. You as a teacher, if you are a homeschool mom or dad and you're involved in a process of trying to teach your child everything, you're going to be exhausted. If you'll get involved in the process of encouraging an environment so they learn to learn, you're going to be way better off. It's kind of why one of our catchphrases is from mommy taught to self-taught, right? Independent learners are learning how to teach themselves. They know how to do this. I mean, they're hardwired for it. And you can tell because in no time they learn computer games, they learn all kinds of things about computers, the internet, whatever. They can learn how it works because they're motivated, they get frustrated, they're curious, they play with it, and they teach themselves. Your homeschool can do that as well. You set a clear direction, you offer them some help, you might give them some ideas, but mostly you want to hold them to working through the frustration to learn it, move to the next thing, work through the frustration, learn it. I want to close with this little example. Brooks, I've shared it before, but I like it. Brooks, our youngest, was pretty good at math and very conscientious, so we'd study and do well. And so in the course of time, we watched him teach himself math. And he did well all the way up. He, in the final analysis, made a perfect LSAT math score. But when he hit calculus, when he was about 14 or so, 14 and a half, something, a little over 14, because he finished on his 15th birthday, essentially. So Brooks is sitting there, and he's done math fine, and then he gets to calculus. Now, I don't know calculus. I studied pre-calculus so long ago, I'd probably have to look up, make sure I'm spelling it right. So calculus, he's in there on his first day of calculus, and I hear him making noises. I imagine he threw something or slammed a book down. He was clearly frustrated. And I walked in and I said, "So what's up?" He said, "These people are dumb. They don't know what to do. Saxon guy, they don't know what they're doing." Okay. So I said, "Well, let's do something. Let's figure out how many problems you've solved in the course of your math career with Saxon, the curriculum we were using." And we sat down and went through the books and added them up and found out that he had done something like 29,000 problems correctly. Almost all of them himself, right? 29,000 problems correctly. And we knew they were correct because the ones he missed, he went back and finished and, redid until he got it. If you don't have your children redo the problems they miss, they're not going to learn. So he realized he'd done 20,000. I said, "You've done 20,000 problems correctly in this program, right?" And I think we found maybe 2 mistakes in the book or 3. But 29,000 you've gotten right, and they taught you to do it. I said, "What are the odds that they suddenly lost their mind and don't have any idea what they're doing?" And he said, "I get it." And his little 14-year-old soul sat down, started working at it steady, and he figured out calculus. And he'll always have that. He'll also have something else, a skill to say, just like calculus, may be frustrating, but you know what? I bet it's learnable. Everything's learnable. And so he got a skill in his soul to go off and, if he didn't understand it, to just simply educate himself. The more involved you are, the more teaching you do, the more you take away from that child that opportunity to wrestle and struggle and learn. Anyway, I hope that you find this helpful. Bless you.